So if we have even Dr. Siddharth and my Dr. Sharika here, there was a question from Manish Kumar before we went for a break. Would we like to answer that question right now?
Sure, I think we can take that question.
Sure. So, Dr. Siddharth, the question is that during the session of UNICEF conceptual framework of nutrition has been discussed multiple times. Can you tell which one should be targeted to encounter wasting, and how long will it
Okay.
take to see any changes in this indicator?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the participants there. So basically, to answer this question, basically, if you look at wasting as an indicator, and of course, there are different forms of, the severity of wasting may vary. But yes, if we talk about severe wasting, I mean, which is say a severely malnourished child, severely acute malnourished child, there are centers with the government which is available, which are called as nutrition rehabilitation centers or malnutrition treatment centers, which are available across different districts and different parts of the country. Uh, of course, a severely acute malnourished child cannot be treated at home. If there are complications with the child, like a medical complication, if he's presenting with fever or no appetite or something of that sort, he needs to be taken to that hospital. So it's a medical emergency. I mean, you cannot treat it on I mean, that's a acute condition. So I'll leave that separate. But if we are talking about, say, moderate wasting, I mean, wasting which may not be as severe as one we are talking about. So in that cases, again, there are no one particular solutions in this. But if I were to talk about one intervention or one particular area of work, it would be dietary diversification, because primarily, if you look at figures and indices from India, from the National Family Health Survey as well, it says that only 9% of our people, I mean, across the country, are able to get a diet which is diverse. When I say a diet which is diverse, as per the National Institute of Nutrition, seven to eight food groups per day. Okay, which includes, say, your tubers, vegetables, green leafy vegetables, and all of that. So an individual should ideally consume bits and pieces, but of course, in certain proportion, all of these different food groups. It also includes milk, non-vegetarian foods. So that's something which I wanted to say. But if you look at the overall indices in India, it says only 9%. So it's a very shameful fact that given the country produces so much food, we are, a food sufficient country that way. But still, if our population is not able to reach it, there is an issue. And I mean, of course, there are many reasons why this is not reaching. I mean, the food is not reaching people. And the most of the reasons, as you know, as was explained in that slide previously as well, was that there are nutrition specific issues and there are sensitive. I mean, specifics are the ones which only relate to a nutrition intervention, and sensitive are the one which, as a community, or say, or the basic causes which we had talked about. So as a community, there are interventions which need to be done, like, say, like some of the participants also mentioned about improving education, improving, providing sources of income. So these are different measures. So having said that, wasting or stunting per se cannot be improved in with one bullet kind of a thing. It has to be improved over the time, and the way it develops is also over time. Likewise, it can be improved over time itself. There have been successful case studies which basically say, like, say, for example, in cases like countries like African countries, wherein we talk about providing RUTF, or ready to use therapeutic foods, you give it to wasted children and they kind of put on weight. But to make it more sustainable, you need to have something from the community or something which backs it up. You cannot just give like one time a product and then make the child healthy and again leave it up to them to kind of sustain that health. So if I talk about wasting or nutrition per se in the long run, yes. So what I was just saying, that there are solutions like, say, RUTF, which are also under discussion by the government of India. But I mean, there are certain factions of the society which are against it. So that is still a policy consideration which is being, taken by the government of India. But till that time, dietary diversification, introducing a variety of foods is also one concern which we need to, that is one aspect through which we can address some of these concerns. But yes, having said that, it's not one bullet. It has to be looked at in a wholesome perspective, as I said last time. Over.
Right. Thank you for the answer, Manish. Kumarji, I hope that answers your question. If you would like to add something, you can unmute yourself and ask right away if you still have any doubts on that.
Thanks, Dr. Siddharth, for taking up this question and answering my query. If I correctly remember, what I came through the session that WFP work in India is working towards reducing the stunting. So I was looking that perspective. I do understand that dietary diversity and having 8 food groups is quite impossible in scenario in our country where we do have multiple problems, and then addressing nutrition is a multi-pronged thing where we need to look into livelihood, education. So it's quite impossible. So I was just trying to understand the perspective of WFP to reduce stunting. So I was looking answer on that perspective. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we can do one thing, Manish ji, agar we have more questions, we can keep it and we'll have a proper Q&A session as well towards the end. There's more coming in as well for all our audience and participants right now. We have a next expert ready. We have Ms. Manisha Kaushik, who is the Program Policy Officer at WFP.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to Dr. Sharika, Dr. Siddharth, and Tanmoy for the insightful sessions on malnutrition and WFP work in India. Just before the tea break, we were having a discussion on the concern about the increase of the consumption of junk food among children, and how can we address that. And this is where SBCC, social and behavior change communication, comes into picture. This is where the role of SBCC in nutrition programming is very, very important. Even in the pre-assessment Menti quiz, we saw that a lot of our participants believe that behavior change communication and NHED is very important to address malnutrition, and this is very correct. So on today's session, we will talk about all these. So we'll be covering a brief introduction to social and behavior change communication. We'll talk about role of SBCC in nutrition programming. We'll see how do we develop a SBCC strategy, SBCC plan. A very important aspect of SBCC is monitoring and evaluation. So we will also be covering that. We will then move on to the group work. We have some very interesting activity for our participants. And then we'll talk about the key SBCC interventions of WFP India. So before I move further, let's move and see what exactly is SBCC, and let's learn about that.
What if you could make a simple change right now that could improve your health or your family's health for years to come? You'd probably make that change today, right? Well, sometimes change isn't that simple. What if this change was the opposite of something you'd always done? And what if everyone else you knew was also doing that same thing? This means you wouldn't just be breaking a habit, you could be breaking a community tradition or a social norm. So how do you get a person to make a behavior change? And then a community? And then a country? To do that, you need social and behavior change communication, or SBCC. SBCC programs use the power of communication to change behaviors by influencing people's knowledge, attitudes, and social norms for the better. SBCC is more than just an advertisement or a website. It coordinates messaging across a variety of communication channels, reaching multiple levels of society: the individual, the community, and eventually, policymakers. So people receive the right information at the right time from sources they know and trust. Social and behavior change communication influences people to make healthier decisions. This can lead to long-lasting impacts on health and well-being. It has been proven to help prevent HIV and AIDS, increase the use of modern family planning methods, promote malaria prevention and treatment, improve child survival rates, and more. That's because SBCC is strategic, systematic, and targeted. SBCC programs are grounded in theory, designed using existing data, and measured to show evidence of their impact.
So what we see here from this video, what we understand, that SBCC addresses change both at the societal level and the individual behavior level. SBCC is based on a lot of theories. It is evidence-based. SBCC is always research and evidence-based. It applies the social ecological model, the SEM for behavior change. We'll talk about SEM a little later. It involves partners and community throughout the process. There's a lot of engagement. There's a lot of participations from the community, from the target audience. It uses multiple channels of communication. We will also be talking about channels of communication. It doesn't only rely on one channel, it uses multiple channels. Again, like I said earlier, it addresses change at the individual levels, community level, and societal level. And SBCC uses three key strategies of advocacy, social mobilization, and behavior change communication. So these are the three important strategies of SBCC. Now we have talked about the social ecological model. What is the social ecological model? So there are multiple behavior theories that exist, but the SEM is the primary model for SBCC programming. We need to understand that nutrition related behavior is not a personal choice, but it is the product of the environment in which people live. Thus, this social ecological model, it acknowledges that nutrition behavior is influenced by factors at various levels. So you see there are, various circles, there are various level of influences. At the individual level, it talks about the individual knowledge, attitude, and behavior. There is interpersonal level, the family, the immediate family, the friends, the network, the community where you belong to, your village, your town, your immediate environment, at the organization level, and then ultimately at the policy and at the policy level. So these are the various level of influences, and the social ecological model, it guides the design, implementation, and monitoring efforts of SBCC. So this model is very important to design your SBCC approach. Next, I would like to talk about another important aspect of SBCC, which is called behavior change cycle. So please, let's look at this video. It will give you an insight into what exactly is the behavior cycle.
Sumitra, the Asha of village Rampur, was concerned that a few families in the village were not bringing their babies for immunization. She decided to visit their homes and explain to them the importance and need of immunization. One of the houses she visited was that of Shanta, a lady with a 6-month-old baby who had never been immunized. Sumitra discussed with Shanta the need to immunize her son. Shanta said that her family did not believe in immunization and that her mother-in-law and husband Ramlal would never allow her to immunize the child. Sumitra, in a very friendly and caring manner, explained to Shanta the importance of immunization and asked her to attend the Village Health and Nutrition Day the following Wednesday along with her baby. The day of the Village Health and Nutrition Day, Sumitra noted that Shanta did not come with her baby for immunization. After the session, Sumitra took the Anganwadi worker to Shanta's house. She explained the importance of immunization to Ramlal and his mother. After much persuasion, they agreed to immunize the child. As the auxiliary nurse midwife was still in the village, they were able to administer the first doses of polio and DPT as well as BCG to the child. Sumitra told Shanta and her family that they should bring the baby for the second dose of vaccines on the next VHND the following month. A week later, Sumitra visited Shanta's house to find out how the baby was and also to remind them to bring the baby for the second dose. Shanta's mother-in-law complained that the child was restless after immunization and had fever all night through. Sumitra examined the baby and explained that it was normal for some babies to develop fever after immunization and that there was no cause for concern. On the next VHND, Shanta did not come to the PHC. Sumitra again sent the Anganwadi helper to Shanta's house but she refused to come since her family was against any further immunization. This was because the child had fever after the previous vaccination, and they had also heard that it could cripple the child. The child thus missed the second dose. Sumitra then decided that it was important to convince Ramlal. She spoke to the Sarpanch and also to two of Ramlal's neighbors who were his friends. All of them had an elaborate discussion with the family and informed them that all the children in the village were being immunized and that this had led to a marked reduction in diseases. They also explained that it was the right of every child to get immunized and that as parents it was their duty to take good care of the child's health. Both Ramlal and his mother, finally convinced, accompanied Shanta to the PHC where the child received the second dose of vaccines. Since then, the parents have diligently ensured that the child receives all the vaccines, including for measles and vitamin A prophylaxis. Shanta now takes the help of Ramlal and the Sarpanch to actively advocate for immunization of children.
So what we see here, uh, we see two things here. We have talked about the social ecological model. So in this, we see that for any particular scenario, for any particular uptake of the desired behavior, there are multiple level of influences for behavior change. It can be at the individual level, it can be at the interpersonal level, it can be at the community level. So in that perspective, now when we talk about the behavior change cycle, so we need to understand that behavior change process is not an overnight phenomena. The video talked about the immunization of a child, but we keep seeing even today regarding the COVID-19 vaccine also, there is a lot of refusal, there's a lot of confusion among people, there's a lack of awareness, and that change, towards uptake of vaccine services will not happen overnight. It is a long process and it has various stages. So when we talk about the behavior change cycle, there are seven steps of behavior change. There is awareness, the first step, desire, knowledge skill. The person then tries out that particular behavior. Then there is repetition. Then the person maintains it, and then there is sustaining that particular behavior. As you can see from the diagram, the dropouts can happen at every stage. The behavior change can also start at any stage, but the dropouts can also start at any stage. And why the dropouts happen? It is because of the barriers. So we need to address those barriers, and to address those barriers, we need to create an enabling environment. So in the video, we saw that the perception of vaccination among the mother-in-law and the husband acted as a barrier for the child to take the second dose. So what did the Asha do? She contacted the sarpanch, the key influencers in the village, which helped them to create an enabling environment. So in order to address the barrier, in order to prevent the dropout, it is very important to create this enabling environment, to constantly follow up, sorry, to constantly follow up and support each family like the Asha did in the video. So this is the behavior change cycle. And once all the stages are covered, then we can say that a particular behavior can be sustained for a long time. Now, next, we would like to talk about the role of SBCC in nutrition programming. Why is SBCC very important and, very important for nutrition programming? We will shortly see that the UNICEF conceptual framework that Dr. Sharika and Dr. Siddharth has talked about, a lot of underlying causes of malnutrition is linked with behaviors. So we need to inculcate the SBCC component in nutrition programming. The SBCC approach result in uptake of the desirable the nutrition behavior. It also, there have been evidences that suggest that SBCC improves the dietary practices, it improves the breastfeeding practices, complementary feeding practices among the pregnant and lactating women. Like I said, the underlying and immediate causes of malnutrition are behavioral, and it is influenced by the behavior at the individual and the household member. And that's why SBCC becomes very pertinent here. It also helps to increase the knowledge of the beneficiary, which can be sustained for years even when the intervention ends. It helps to increase the knowledge, attitude, social norms, and helps to give the desired nutrition outcomes. And if we talk about the first 1,000 days, it also impacts the nutrition status. So we can see that it is a very, very important component in nutrition programming. This is the framework that the conceptual framework on malnutrition that we have talked about. In this, I want to focus on the underlying causes of malnutrition and that they are heavily influenced by behavior. So it is from the working paper by the Spring Project, which was released in 2014. And it outlines that how a behavior play a very, very important role to address nutrition, the underlying causes of malnutrition. It can be behavior at the household level, behavior related to food products, purchase, storage, and intra-household distribution, behavior related to the maternal, infant, young child nutrition care, behavior related to the utilization and demand for health and sanitation services. Thus, this framework talks about that how if we address those behavior, it helps to, it will lead to an improvement in the maternal, infant, and young child feeding practices, the nutrition practices, and also the delivery. Can see, if you see at the bottom, there are the delivery strategies. What can be the delivery strategies? It can be social mobilization, it can be behavior change communication, then it can be advocacy, and then there are non-communication strategies also. Thus, this framework demonstrates that in order to achieve improved maternal, infant, and young child nutrition practices and overall improved nutrition status, it is important to address key behavioral determinant target at a particular population through the SBCC strategies. So this is how this conceptual framework of the pathways from SBCC delivery strategies to improved MIYCN practices and status comes into place. This is very important to understand the whole importance of SBCC nutrition programming. Next, we talk about WFP's interventions and entry point for SBCC in WFP nutrition. What is an entry point? What can be defined as an entry point? An entry point can be anything where a behavioral modification is required. So in WFP nutrition programming, the SBCC is embedded in 3 specific interventions. The first is the nutrition specific intervention. These interventions, they require intensive SBCC approaches to reduce stigma and widening of coverages. The next is nutrition and emergencies. So the SBCC is quite important in nutrition programming in emergency context. So the development process is adapted for the emergency situation. And next we have the nutrition sensitive intervention. In this, SBCC is necessary to address the food access, and SBCC help to increase the nutritious sensitivity of WFP programming. So these are the 3 interventions through which can be termed as the entry point for SBCC, and it becomes an important component of all 3 interventions. Next, we'll move on to the development process. Now, how do we develop an SBCC strategy? We keep on hearing about it. How do we approach it? So if we see, there are 4 phases. It can be that SBCC development process can be divided into 4 phases: the formative phase, the development phase, the programming phase, and the most important, the monitoring and evaluation phase. Now, these are the various steps that can be taken to develop an SBCC approach. Different organization can adapt it, they can modify it as per their requirement. This is the WFP nutrition monitoring and evaluation document. This is how we approach it, but the basic tenets remain the same. In step 2 of the formative phase, if you see, a well-defined SMART objective is very, very important for the SBCC's approach. What is a SMART objective? Your objectives have to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So these are the SMART objectives. And while planning for it, while designing it, we need to be very cognizant of that. Then there is the monitoring and evaluation phase. It is very, very important, and we will talk about it in a little detail. So next we move on to a very another very important topic is to factors to consider while selecting a communication channel. Now we see there are various channels when you talk about SBCC. There is IPC, there is one-to-one counseling, there is group communication. With the advent of digital media, there's a lot of social media platforms. So how do we decide what should be our deciding factor? How do we understand that what are the factors to consider while we select a communication channel for our own program? So these are some of the factors that is very important. These are the determinant factor which help you decide what kind of channel to select for your particular SBCC program. As you can see, complexity of the issue, how complex is the issue, what are the issue, what is the uh, thematic area that you are trying to cover, what is the sensitivity of the issue, literacy of that particular area of your target audience. It is very important to understand the literacy. What is your desired reach? What are you trying to cover? It is very important to also understand media habits and preferences. What do the people like to see? What do the people like to read? What is the most common media platforms used in those areas? It is very important to tap that. And then one of the most important factor is the budget available. Now everything these days is guided by budget. Also, you can have very elaborate plans, you can have very elaborate strategies, but if you don't have the money, then it is very difficult to implement those. So you have to be mindful of the budget also. But nowadays, more and more organizations are using a media mix. They are combining various communication channels. They are using multiple platforms for their SBCC approach. And why are they doing that? Because there are evidences which show that using different platforms, reinforcing messages, repeating messages, it helps in better recall and impact. Now, if you see here, this is an example of a media mix. For a particular intervention, if we use interpersonal, mid-media, mass media, social media, if we use a combination of all these channels, then on various platforms we are giving same messages, but it is adapted according to that particular channel. So it will help you for better recall, it will help you for better impact. If you take the example of any program, recent program, be it Poshan Abhiyan or Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao, all these kind of programs, they use multiple channels. There are on radios, there are on social media, mass media, newspapers. Then there are health workers conducting one-to-one session and group session at the community level. There is community mobilization. So nowadays, for better impact, it is more and more important to use a combination of these channels. So this is again very important when we design an SBCC approach. Then we move on to a very, very important component, which is monitoring and evaluation. Now, M&E, monitoring and evaluation, is a very frequently used terms. We all use it. We use it day and night, and So, but do we really understand what is the difference between monitoring and evaluation? There is a very clear difference between the two. Monitoring, it focuses on the processes throughout the course of the project. Evaluation is conducted at specific time. The monitoring, it looks at result at the operational level. Evaluation looks at relationship between results and impact. The monitoring is concerned with tracking of the progress. So in terms of input, activity, output, about which we'll talk about it a little later. Evaluation examines the logic and design, whatever a theory of change or the project design that you have developed, it examines that. Monitoring is an ongoing activity. It can be obtained at a shorter level. It can there can be long monitoring activity and then shorter monitoring activity. But evaluation, it takes time. It results measures result over a period of time. it takes longer to collect, analyze, and use. What monitoring results into? It results into change in the activities. What are the activities you're trying to do, and leads to mid-course correction. Evaluation leads to redesign of the project and policies in the future. The monitoring is undertaken by the project management team, the team which is managing the project, and evaluation is mostly done by external agencies or different unit. So these are the some of the important difference between monitoring and evaluation. Why is it important? They are complementary, and they are complementary, important to each other, and better quality of monitoring make evaluation more insightful. Now we can ask that why do we focus so much on monitoring and evaluation? When the M&E of the overall program, it takes place, why do we need to have separate monitoring and evaluation of the SBCC component? We can just develop the material and go to the field, use them. People are very happy. We get instant reaction from them. They understand. Why do we need to do that? So the answer is that it helps you to keep the activities on track. What are your intended outputs? It helps you to keep a track of that. It helps you to understand the relationship between input, output, outcome, and impact, the whole chain. It assesses the resource use, because again, everything is bound to budget. So are you doing the optimal utilization of your resources? Are they being channelized in the right direction? It really especially in long-term projects for 2 years, 3 years, it's very important to take mid-course correction, whether it is going in the right direction, and thus monitoring and evaluation is a very helpful tool, and it also leads to improvement in intervention design. Therefore, a well-designed M&E plan saves times and resources. It is very true, and it is beneficial to the project management team only, because it helps them to optimize resources, help them to see that the project is going in the right direction. Now, again, okay. Now, when we talk about monitoring and evaluation, we talk about a lot of terms. We talk about a lot of terminology. So I just wanted to cover that. They may sound very similar, but each component of the M&E framework, they play a very important role, and they help you in the right direction. So it is very important to understand their meanings and understand why are they being used. So I will just give you a couple of minutes to go through it, and then we can talk about it. Now, when we talk about the indicators, what are the indicators? They measure the achievement of output, outcome, and impact. They are measurable. We keep on having, listening this term, outcome indicators, output indicators, evaluation indicators. So these indicators, they measure the achievement. Then goal is what it envisions the result. What are you planning this project for? What is your ultimate goal? So goal is that it focuses on broad aims of the project. What are your objectives? We talked about smart objectives a little while back. So what are your objectives? It has to be linked to the goal. It has to be action oriented. Basically, objectives are something that you would do. So it has to be these are the operational statement that you would actually do on the field. Inputs, what are the resources you need? What are the things that you need to carry carry out your project? The activities that you plan, what based on your objectives, based on your goal, what are the activities that you are planning? And what are how will you use those inputs, the inputs in the project? Then output are the immediate results. Output is something that that you see immediately, and it also focuses on broad aim of the project. Outcomes take a little longer. It only happen when the outputs are working and it is linked to the project goal. And then impact is the bigger picture. Is basically it describes the result of activities, outputs, and outcome. It takes a longer time to see an impact. It cannot be seen within a month or two. If you want any behavior like a hand washing practices, if you believe that you can see the impact within 6 months, 1 year. No, it takes time, it takes the sustained effort. So impact gives you the bigger picture, and it measures, it is very important to measure the impact, and it can be measured both through qualitative and quantitative research. So these are some of the important terms of an M&E framework. जैसे हम कहते हैं कि अगर M&E फ्रेमवर्क एक माला है, तो ये सारे जो कंपोनेंट्स है, ये उसके अलग अलग मोती हैं. ये सारी चीजें आइसोलेशन में काम नहीं करती हैं. दे आर ऑल लिंक्ड टू ईच अदर, दे आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू ईच अदर, एंड इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर द प्रोजेक्ट मैनेजमेंट टीम टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस in order to successfully implement their program. Now, okay, so now we have some group work for you guys. It focuses on the topic that we have just covered. Before the group work, I'll just want to cover the WFP intervention, so that we can just after the group work we can uh, focus on the discussion. So when we talk about key SBCC interventions, so we have been doing a lot of work. We have been using multiple channels, multiple strategies in different parts of the country. So this is a project that we undertook in Kerala, and we extensively use mid media. So we use a lot of folk media, puppets, and puppet show were conducted with the people to promote this fortified THR known as Amrutam Nutrimix. So to increase the awareness, to increase its demand, to make the people understand, what is it all about, how is it important for your children. So these activities were conducted. Apart from that, we used sensitization session, as you can see, using age appropriate flyers. So they were age appropriate for 6 to 8 months, 9 to 12 months. It is also very important to develop your messages for your target audience. So, a child who is 9 months old, if you give him a flyer for a 24-month-old, then that will not be useful to that, to the parents. So you also have to be mindful of your target audience. So for that reason, we developed these age appropriate flyers. Then, for our fortification of school meals under the midday meal program in Varanasi, uh, we had a lot of activities, lot of combination of activities. We had NHED sessions, which were quite popular among both the school staff and the school children. It saw a lot of engagement. We had awareness activities using poster flex, and what we focused on is to involve the children in the activity. So they developed a lot of materials on their own using the IC materials that were given to them. As you can see, they have made a food pyramid kind of thing. So there are a lot of engaging activities with the children. There was snake and ladder game to as part of our sensitization sessions. Then we also worked with the women there, and they were a part of the awareness campaign using the nutrition van, which was called the Poshan Chetna Rath. And as Dr. Siddharth had mentioned before, Eat Right India campaign was also a part of it. And there were a lot of ICBCC materials that were developed, and there were a lot of activities, very engaging and very interesting, because we are dealing with school children. It is very important to directly and actively engage with them, and we were quite mindful of that. We are also in the process of developing an ICBCC package on fortified rice, like Dr. Siddharth had mentioned before. So as part of the package, we have developed these set of IC materials. We are developing the social media collaterals for them. We have also developed some radio jingles, and they'll be approved at the national level, and then it will be shared with the 15 states that are currently implementing the scheme on rice fortification. So we'll be sharing the regional language versions with them. So this is the small mascot that we developed to increase the recall and impact, because it is always important that a visual aid is there to associate with a new idea, with a new product. So this is a mascot on fortified rice that we had developed. we are currently implementing this project, decentralized production of take-home ration, which also Dr. Siddharth has mentioned. As part of this project, we have developed some animated videos. We have developed this logo that is on the THR packets in Uttar Pradesh right now. Again, we developed the flyers for Uttar Pradesh, and we also designed the THR packet. Now it's just not the packet design like we also see in our homes. If you look at the packet, if you look at the back of it, there are some very important. Some of them, they do contain nutrition messages, and we also included some important nutrition related messages for our different target audience. So and also for mothers, for the caregivers, we included messages on how to feed the child the THR product. So these we saw an opportunity to disseminate messages through the packets also. So we did through these packets, and then these are some of the other interventions that we have. We have developed a set of awareness videos on COVID-19. You can find them on the WFP India YouTube channel. They are very interesting. They cover very different topics. They are on domestic violence. They are on health and nutrition of pregnant and lactating women, how to maintain overall health of the family during the COVID-19 pandemic. So some of the very interesting topics have been covered through these videos. These are the app, very interesting app that Tanmoy had talked about earlier. And then we also developed a set of posters on food safety and hygiene in kitchen. So these are some of the important interventions of WFP. Now we'll go back to the group work because, okay. So this is the group work for the first team. Okay, so there are only 2 teams now. So for the first team, these are the instructions. You will also find them in your breakout group. I'll just want to explain it in a bit. So you have 10 minutes for the discussion, and you have 2 to 3 minutes for the presentation. Basically, the first step is that you have to select one communication channel, whatever communication channel that you would like to select, whether it's IPC group communication. Then you have to select one audience group. What is the audience, target audience that you want to focus on, depending on your thematic area. If you work on adolescent girls, if you work on pregnant and lactating women, if you work, with any other target group, you can choose that. Then we have talked about the barriers. What are the key barriers do you think that are stopping the target group from adopting that behavior? Now we talked about the increase in the consumption of junk food among the rural children, as Geeta ma'am had talked about earlier. So what do you think are the barriers that's stopping the children from having healthy food, or that's encouraging them to eat junk food? These are called the communication barriers. So you have to, I have given an example for pregnant women, that some of the barriers, myths and misconception are that throwing away of the colostrum because it's considered impure, or not allowing newborn to step out for vaccination. So these are some of the barriers in terms of pregnant women and newborn child. But what are the barriers of the particular target audience that you have selected? Then, in view of the barriers, what are the key messages that you would like to give, so that the messages, they counter those barriers and they act as facilitators? And then what are the activities do you think you would design? Like, do you think one-to-one counseling would help? If it's family planning, so do you think a couple session will help? So what are the activities that you would like to design? Be also mindful of the budget. If you don't have budget for a TV ad, then you cannot develop a TV ad. So be mindful of the budget. And what are the materials you would, what are the, so these are the inputs, materials are the inputs. What are the materials you would like to develop in order to support those activities? Poster, brochure, flyer. So this is the first group work. And now I'll talk about the second. Okay, the second group. The second group work is an M&E log frame. This is the case study that have been given. You can go through it. So basically, for one of the interventions in Uttar Pradesh to increase the nutritional effectiveness of the midday meal scheme, We have to implement a SBCC strategy for which WFP team will visit the government schools in Varanasi, and they plan to conduct NHED sessions with the school children on these topics. And these activities will be conducted in a calendar format. Each topic will be introduced for 1 quarter. And then some of the activities will be conducted with them. There are some of the messages. So this is the calendar. These are the topics that have to be covered. These are the key messages, and there are activities planned. Based on this, you have to develop a MNE log frame for this particular program. It will not be very accurate because there's not a lot of information, but because you have got a basic idea of an MNE log frame. So what do you think, according to you, would be the goal of the project, objectives, should be the output, outcome, and the overall impact? So these are the 2 group work, and now you will be taken to the breakout sessions, and you will be given 10 minutes to discuss, and any one of you can volunteer or can be nominated by your team to present it. You will have 2 to 3 minutes, and you will also have some of us in the group. So if there is any confusion, so that can be cleared. We will have our team members there as moderators. So I'll stop sharing now, and this content will also be available to you in the breakout session. So as you can see here, the goal is to improve the overall nutrition effectiveness of the MDM scheme. The objectives are improved nutritional health and hygiene, knowledge, attitude, and behavior, because we are also talking about change in their behavior and uptake of desirable nutrition behavior. Outputs are number of the sessions done, number of the children participated, number of the school staff trained, number of activities conducted. Then after output, the outcome is how many children, percentage of children that exhibit increased knowledge, they exhibit the intention to adopt the healthy behavior. Here in outcomes, we cannot definitely say that they have adopted it because it takes longer time to assess, but at least showing the intention that yes, we will adopt those behavior. They are showing an increase in the knowledge, and an intention to adopt the behavior, and the impact will be, the overall impact can be the reduction in malnutrition, but this impact here would be that the percentage of school children, they show an increased acceptability towards desired nutrition and health behavior. It is witnessed that they show a desirability to accept those behaviors. So this has to do with the with the MNE log frame. Another thing that I want to share is this very small video. We keep on talking about communication material. We talked about posters and all, but we should also know how to use them effectively. These are the tools. They are not just to be pasted on the walls and to be done away with it. How to use it and how to use it effectively for your SBCC activities. So let me take you to the video.
पोस्टर क्या है? पोस्टर एक प्रकार की सूचना, शिक्षा, संप्रेषण यानी IEC सामग्री है। पोस्टर का उपयोग टीकाकरण, स्तनपान कराने के सही तौर तरीकों या उपयुक्त पोषण के महत्व जैसे विषयों के बारे में अतिरिक्त जानकारी देने और जागरूकता फैलाने के लिए किया जा सकता है। पोस्टर कहाँ लगाएं? पोस्टरों को ऐसे स्थानों पर लगाएं जहां ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोग उन्हें देख सकें। उदाहरण के लिए स्वास्थ्य केंद्र में, प्राथमिक स्वास्थ्य केंद्र के प्रतीक्षा कक्ष में, परीक्षा भवन, बस स्टॉपों, किराए के दुकानों, आंगनवाड़ी केंद्र इत्यादि। याद रहे कि आपको पोस्टर ऐसे स्थानों में लगाने हैं जहां आपके लक्ष्य समूह उन्हें देख सकें। पोस्टर कैसे लगाएं? पोस्टर लगाते समय निम्नलिखित बातों का ध्यान रखें। इसे इतनी ऊंचाई पर लगाना चाहिए जहां लोग इसे साफ साफ देख सकें और आसानी से पढ़ सकें। ऐसी दीवार पर न लगाएं जिस पर सीलन हो। वहां ऐसी इमारतें आदि नहीं होनी चाहिए जिनसे पोस्टर को देखने में अड़चन आए। पोस्टर साफ जगह पर लगाएं ताकि उस जगह पर खड़े होकर लोग पोस्टर पढ़ सकें। पोस्टर ऐसे स्थान पर नहीं लगाना चाहिए जहां दूसरे पोस्टर पहले से लगे हों जो ध्यान अपनी ओर आकर्षित करते हों। इस बात पर विचार करें कि पोस्टर का उद्देश्य क्या है और कौन उसे देखेगा। पोस्टरों का उपयोग आपके समुदाय के लोगों के साथ विचार विमर्श करने के लिए भी किया जा सकता है। इससे उनमें दिलचस्पी पैदा होगी और दो तरफा संवाद संभव हो पाएगा। लोगों से पूछें कि पोस्टर में उन्होंने क्या देखा और इसका वे क्या मतलब निकालते हैं। अगर उन्होंने सही उत्तर दिया है तो उनकी समझ को सकारात्मक तरीके से और गहरा बनाएं। अगर गलत उत्तर दिया है तो नम्रता और धैर्य के साथ उनकी समझ को सही बनाइए।
Okay, so we see here it was very important, and I wanted to just share that we see that we develop a lot of ICBCC materials. There's a lot of flip books and posters, flyer, pamphlet, on a lot of topics, on a lot of issues. But we should understand and we should know how to use them effectively as a tool with the community, with the target audience, and make use of the messages, because just putting them on the wall and expecting that people will read it, that's one-way communication. That is not SBCC. There has to be a two-way communication. There has to be an interaction and discussion on that. So like in the video it's shown, it should be prominently placed. It should be, used as a tool to initiate discussion. That just like posters, all the kind of tools that are developed, they are very important. The print material or the digital material that are being developed, and they should be used as tools at the community level, at the grassroots level, to initiate the desired discussion, so that the desired nutrition and health behavior can be undertaken by the target audience. So that's it from my side. I think we can take the question at the end of the session. We have just one session left. So over to you, Andadeep. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Manisha. I think that was a very engaging and interactive session, and everybody had their brain cells working and thinking over it. Thank you for that. And please, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Manisha, I completely understand that we had a lot more to ask and think and talk about. So please use this time to put in your questions in the chat box. We can definitely take it towards the end of session. Now we're coming almost to the end of our session, and I would like to invite Dr. Siddharth Bhagulkar back on the screen to please give us his inputs on malnutrition in light of COVID. Please, over to you, Dr. Siddharth.
Sure. Thanks, Andadeep. And I trust me on this. I'll try to make this session a little quick because I understand it's lunchtime and it's quite late. So I'll keep it very short. It'll be joint presentation between me and Tanmay again. And I'll be let's be very. I mean, like if we talk about COVID and its implications on food security and nutrition. I mean, the definition of food security, what it says is that all people at all times have physical, economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. I mean, you see the keywords that have been highlighted, like, at all people at all times and physical and economic access. I mean, it covers different aspects of, say, food. So what happened with COVID was that, say, if we talk about the farmer or the agriculture sector, with the lockdown measures, with the containment measures, what we had was that, somewhere it did affect some of the agriculture sector as well, or say the cultivation of crops. Say again, because people working on the field, some of the seasonal workers, some of the marginal workers, they went back to their own villages, or say some of them were not allowed to work. And this was largely seen also during the last COVID season as well. And if you see the transportation, it was also affected in a sense. And you would also see that wastage of the farm produce, some of the production of high nutritious foods were also impacted. You would see a lot of focus on providing foods which provide calories or something. So that was the impact on the farmer or the agriculture sector. If you look at the total general population, this is something which we all have seen, is that there was loss of income, loss of employment, which led to also, in a sense, that the purchasing power of people, I mean, that was also in a sense affected. You would also see that the cost of food have risen. I mean, if you consider this particular COVID, you would see that the prices of oil and basic pulses have gone up high. Likewise, you would see it's what it has led to is that it has led to limited access, availability, and also affordability of these foods, which in turn leads to poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. If you look at the overall GDP, again, smaller industries have been affected, or say small, medium enterprises, they've been affected because of the lockdown and containment measures. Again, a lot of these industries, I mean, since they're not producing, again, that has led to lack of employment, financial losses, and all of that. And how did people, so in a sense, it has threatened our own food security landscape across all the different parameters, be it availability, access of food, stability, and utilization. What it also led to is that people digging deep into their own resources, like say talking about adopting coping mechanisms, like purchasing less food, or maybe substituting food, wholesome food or good food, nutritious food with lesser nutritious alternatives and all, or reducing the number of meals and so on and so forth. You would also see that, especially when we talk about the government-run food safety net programs, uh, these were functioning before the COVID pandemic. But again, they've now, I mean, there has been an impact in certain states. They stopped functioning, and that is why you would see that these centers which were providing hot cooked meals to the children, be it the Anganwadi centers or be it the midday meals, they are now looking at providing food security allowance, or say food grains and so. So in a way, they have also been affected. I'll not go into depth of this because we've already talked about it. But yes, in a sense, the COVID affected our dietary intake. It also affected the household food security and practices in a sense. And if you look at the basic, it also affected the income and employment opportunities also, and also the other aspects like education, technology, and so, overall leading to malnutrition. So as per the World Food Program, there were already 135 million who suffer from acute malnutrition. Now, due to COVID and the climate change and other factors there, economic downturn, there are another 130 million people worldwide which are at risk of being into acute malnourished or acutely hunger, suffering from acute hunger by the end of this year. And our chief economist, what he says is that they did not even need COVID-19. I mean, people were actually living their lives and were just hanging by a thread. COVID-19 just came up and it's literally these people were hanging and now it's just cut it off and people are going to be acutely food insecure. So what should be the response of a system, especially in a COVID kind of a situation, or say what should be the food security kind of a response in an emergency? The first response that we've seen or we should have is a nutrition assessment. Try and understand what is the levels of malnutrition that are there now due to the COVID pandemic. And yeah. Then we're also talking about management of children with malnutrition. Exactly what we were talking about before the session was that if there are cases of malnutrition and severe acute malnutrition, you need to manage them urgently. Likewise, there are cases of micronutrient deficiency, and you will see that micronutrient deficiency usually rise up after an emergency. So we need to correct them. And then also talk about infant and young child feeding, because we see usually there are a lot of food donations which happen. Food donations of, say, milk powders and say things like Cerelac and all of that. So any substitute to breast milk should be avoided during an emergency, unless conditions demand so, or unless medically advised. But you need to have a check on this particular aspect, that you need to protect infant and young child feeding as well. And then there is food assistance, and you also talk about livelihoods. Basically, food assistance is basically to help people maintain their basic food requirement. So there should be a basic food grain or a cereals or say a basket that you need to provide to people, and a livelihood so that whatever corrective measures we take during an emergency, it should be sustainable and it is supported by changes in or improvements in livelihoods. So these were the points that we talked about. And if I specifically talk about food assistance, so in food assistance, we are talking about food assistance may be done in different forms and different types. So one of them is in-kind food assistance or in-kind food aid, which basically talks about giving giving people with food grains, say if you're providing rice or wheat or say some pulses, some oil, so that is in-kind food aid. The other measure could be cash-based assistance for purchase of food, which could be basically you're providing cash to people so that if say markets are open or say markets can be accessed by people, then they can purchase things as per their own requirement or the food grain as per their requirement. And in case some of these are do not working, I mean they're not working, then you have the option of providing supplementary feeding, or wherein you cook the food or you basically prepare food and or prepare ready-made foods and give it to people, and so that their nutrition or food levels can be maintained. And apart from that, we also have the technical assistance kind of activity wherein you basically provide relevant services and inputs and transfer the skills and knowledge so that the community is empowered. Like say a community kitchen, I mean, a group of people, you empower them to run a community kitchen during such an emergency. So those could be some of these measures. If we look at the overall response during, say, the COVID pandemic that India has seen, so there were responses in different aspects. Like if the government, if I talk about the government responses, you had the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, which basically aimed at providing free food grains, cereals to people, to the most vulnerable people from the society, and to the extent of say 5 kgs per person or per month. And you knew that the government extended it till say December last year, and even this year recently when the Prime Minister announced, they've also extended till Diwali, which was run by the, I mean, this scheme was run by the Department of Food and Public Distribution. You also have the National Food Security Allowance Act in place, wherein in case if, say, under the schemes of ICDS and MDM, if you're not able to provide food or food grains, then you should at least compensate the food aid by providing food security allowance. So which was also put into or actioned upon last year. I think immediately it was put into action. Then there is also home delivery of cash and pension through post. So I think there were some other schemes as well. I've just listed a few on which could be related to, I mean, which are related to the food aspect of it. You would also see corporates, they coming in with the CSR fund, donations to the NGOs or community-based organizations for community relief activities. Some of the IT solutions, say Zomato or say Swiggy kind of institutions coming up and providing food on to people. You see saw some of those activities as well. And then you also had individuals who say provided cooked food packets to people and migrants. They cooked food at their own home and gave to people. So you had initiatives such as that as well. And then you had initiatives from the NGOs, UN agencies, bilateral agencies, wherein we're talking about, say, development of community kitchens or say development of guidances for community kitchens. Then the food relief programs through, say, donations, CSR, through the National Disaster Management activity, and so on and so forth, the development of guidance notes. So there was a lot of activities which was done, and cross-cutting, you would see that across all sectors or across some of these areas, there was a lot of impetus which was also given to the IC activity, or say, making people aware about how could you COVID prevent appropriate behavior, or how could you prevent COVID. I'll just talk in a nutshell about our work as well. So there was some activities, I mean, there were activities which we also implemented. Some of these focused at the short-term support, some of these focused at long-term, and some of these of the mid-term as well. These are the roughly the areas where we also worked across technical assistance to the government, government response, tracking government response. When I talk about tracking government response, there was documents which we developed during this time was basically to track what are the different state governments or what is the national government doing to ensure that the benefits of ICDS and midday meal or say PDS are being reached to people. So there are these tracking sheets which have been developed and which were regularly shared with different state governments and stakeholders, so that say suppose Andhra government or say a particular government is not implementing the food security allowance under ICDS or midday meal. So we track that response every month and send it to the concerned state government and ask them to, yes, please do take action on this particular point, that you've already been issued guidances and please do take. So there was a lot of support which was received from the national government from us for this particular initiative as well. Likewise, policy advocacy, say when we're talking about COVID appropriate behavior or say nutrition during COVID, and how can you maintain nutrition. So there was a lot of work which was also done on this particular aspect. Awareness generation, asking people to adhere to COVID appropriate measures, capacity building, training a lot of NGOs and community-based organization also on say on the food basket, or say providing food aid to people. And then programmatic approaches, like I talked about the take-home ration production units being set up along with women. So it was a model wherein we talked about establishing livelihoods for women, also looking at improving nutrition for children as well. So we worked across the national as well as the state governments, and these are the different documents which we develop, like the state-specific food basket for each of the states in the country. We also develop contextualized food baskets. Say, suppose you're an NGO, and if you want to implement or you want to do food aid for a particular community or a particular location within that state. So what you could do is basically you could just because currently under the NDMA you just have a guidance which says that anything up to 2100 kilocalories could be provided to people. But what that 2100 kilocalories can be is something which is still you need to work out on your own end. So there was state-specific baskets which were developed, and I'll share in my next slide as to how were these developed. Likewise, there was also guidances issued for the midday meal program, and Tanmay will talk in depth about it, slightly, he'll touch base upon that, which was basically what could be done so that after once the schools open or once they start operating, how could it be made functional during the post-lockdown period, and what could be, how could you prevent COVID, or say how could you adopt COVID appropriate measures while preparing food. So this is about the in-kind food assistance or the food basket that I talked about. So it was basically contextualized and customized food baskets. I mean, contextualized, when I say contextualized, it was contextualized to the different states that we were working with. And I mean, we developed it across the country and customized to different people's needs. I mean, say, there are different people in the state, like, children, right up to children till the older age group. So what are the different foods that you need to give, or what are the amounts or quantity of food that you need to give? So that is something which we've developed. Then there are these different components wherein we use, because the assumption was that, say, when you provide a food aid, it should last people for at least 15 days to 1 month. So that is why we did not use a lot of non-perishable items. Perishable items. We used only non-perishable items such as cereals, pulses, oil, salt, and sugar. And it focused on providing, say, the required amount of calories, also to some extent the proteins and fat content appropriate to what is required, and plus some of the vitamins and minerals which are important for the growth and development. It also focused on, say, different ages, different sex group, as I already spoke about it. And then it also takes into account what is already being provided through, say, PDS, MDM, or ICDS. If this is functional in that particular state, then you could actually, account for that, and then accordingly adjust the food basket and give. Some of the challenges which we faced was that, we did not give food items such as milk and milk products, roots and tubers, green leafy vegetables, because these were perishable items, and it could not last more than, say, 15 to 20 days and not provide the necessary benefit to the target population. We could not develop a food basket for, say, Ladakh and Telangana because we did not have that data with us. And wherever, say, fortified foods, wherein some of these states are already distributing fortified food. So we also asked that, some of these cereals could be replaced by the fortified foods which are available in that state, so that you're also able to address some of the micronutrient deficiencies or gaps. This is a sample basket that I've shared from the state of Maharashtra. There is a link for the Dropbox, which I've shared with you in this slide here, and I'll share in the chat box here as well. Is that basically with this link, you can access the different baskets for the different states in the country. And you could also see what are the most appropriate or the preferred baskets in the state. And accordingly, then food aid could be provided to the people there. On the policy advocacy, there were a lot of policy advocacy documents which were developed. I mean, there were a lot of documents which basically talked about changes in the policy, work with a lot of other organizations such as IFPRI, FAO, WHO, UNICEF, you could see that this document, which was ensuring adequate nutrition support during the COVID-19 pandemic, which was developed with WHO and UNICEF, it was widely disseminated across different states and across different parties as well. Then there was this guidance on the food distribution, that if you were to organize a food distribution during COVID, so how can you do it? And I'll share the slides with you all so that you can refer it to once, because since the time is less, I'll just try and go through it quickly. But it talks about how can you maintain social distance and then provide food aid. How can people with disabilities being they can get the food entitlements and so on and so forth. Some of the IC materials that Manisha has talked about already. So you can access it on our YouTube link and some of our social media websites. Some of the webinars, there was a lot of webinars wherein we also did some of these activities wherein we invited participants from, say, outside the country to share some of their experiences, and within India as well, with organizations such as Akshay Patra, the MS Swaminathan Foundation, IP, Global Child Nutrition Forum, and all of that. Yeah. Tanmay, I'd request you to come in here to talk about the midday meal aspect of it. And yeah, over.
Thanks, Siddharth. Siddharth has given overall picture about the response of WFP during the COVID pandemic. So I'll just take you through what is the situation in MDM during the COVID pandemic. Siddharth, can you please make it full screen? Thanks. As you know that, as I have already told you, that more than 100 million children were benefiting on daily basis by midday meal scheme before the pandemic. But due to the pandemic, from March 20, 2020, most of the schools were closed, and government issued guidelines that in the time of school closures, state and UT government need to take immediate action to provide the nutritional support to the children. And it was based on the NFS, that is the National Food Security Act 2013, and government has suggested all the state utilities to provide the food security allowances, which is divided in two parts. Initially, that is in kind, that is the food grain as per the entitlement of the children, and the cash equaling to the cooking cost, that is the food basket consisting of other items like different pulses, oil, etc. But over the period of time, government feels that if they are directly transferring the money to the account of the children, it may not serve the purpose, that is the providing some nutritious food to the children. Then government suggested, when there was a kind of improvement in the COVID situation during last June, government suggested all the states to provide, instead of giving the money into their account, government has suggested just to provide them some dry ration, means the food grains plus other items like different pulses and oils. So various states has adopted various measures to provide the nutritional support to the children. Some of the states like Tamil Nadu has also provided the eggs to the children during this tough time, and most of the states the food basket mainly consists of the food grain, different type of pulses, oil, and in some states it consists some kind of vegetables as well, like potato, like that. Next, Siddharth. And with response to the COVID, WFP has also taken action, as Siddharth has also already mentioned, that we have provided some kind of technical support. Like we have prepared a guideline for the safe serving on midday meal when the schools will reopen. That is the last year. So the that document title was the Making the Midday Meal Functional Following the Schools Reopening, and it was published in May 20. So it is basically divided in two parts. The basic actions to be taken prior to the schools reopening. That is the sanitization of the entire kitchen shed within the school campus. Infrastructure upgrade means if the schools required any kind of infrastructure required to adhere to the COVID appropriate behavior, Then development of SOP means state specific SOP for the distribution of the foods, cooking of foods, etc. Then the capacity building of cook helper, which is really important because they are the main person for the cooking and serving of the midday meal, and development of SOP for ensuring the alternative distribution of midday meal. If any states is still considering to give the food basket to the children, so what should be the SOP? And in that particular guideline, one portion is also there, that the SOP to be followed while procuring and the preparing and serving the midday meal. It was basically for the cook cum helpers and the teachers. So how to procure the raw materials, how to prepare the cooking of the midday meal and the cooking of the midday meals and the serving of midday meals, and how to distribute, that is you need to distribute the foods in a staggered manner, maintaining the social distancing norms. All these things are mentioned there. And after that, many states has taken some clue from these guidelines released by WOP, and they have prepared their own guidelines and following the schools reopening from the last October or November. Next, Siddharth. And as Siddharth was mentioning, that WP has also done work that is the response, that is, if we call it COVID response, which is done both for the ICDS and midday meal. In the midday meal, we have already done it is a kind of quarterly recording of data response by the states and UTs. I'm just showing you the some of the findings of the last quarter of 2021, that is January March quarter. At that time, the schools were started reopening. In 10 states, the school has partially opened, and partially opened means the upper primary sections are opened and the primaries was closed. And in 15 states, elementary classes were fully closed in 10 states. That is, in 10 states, all the classes were open, and in 15 states, only the primary classes were open. And midday meal was functional in terms of hot cook meal, or in terms of giving the food security allowances in 35 states and UTs. Only the Telangana was the state which is not providing any kind of midday meal to the children during that time. And the 7 states were providing, have started providing hot cook meal as well. Some of the states like Punjab, Himachal, even Uttar Pradesh, some of the northeastern states, Andhra Pradesh, these states have started serving the hot cook meal as well. And 24 states and UTs that time as well was providing food security allowances in the form of food grain and other food items. And 16 states and UTs have already prepared the SOPs and guidelines for the serving of midday meal and reopening of schools. But unfortunately, after that, from the March end, that second wave has come, and again the schools were closed, and now all the schools are now back on that mode, that is serving of children through the food basket, that is the food grains, or the transferring of money to their account, or the other food items. And in a recent communication released by Ministry of Education, that they have also doing something in the upcoming summer vacation, as well as they will be providing some kind of relief to the children in the form of transferring some money to the children's account. So thank you. That's all my comment. Over.
Thank you so much, Tanmoy. I think extremely well detailed. Not easy to run through, this vast gamut of information, and I'm sure it's been really helpful for everyone. I would definitely, I see there is a question here by Radhika. Dr. Siddharth or whoever would like to just take it within a minute or so, because we are, we've spilled over our time right now. So anybody would like to take that? I'm just going to quickly read the question by Radhika Gupta. She says, can you share some insights on M&E when we are just starting on SBCC program? So I believe this is for Manisha. Outcomes and impact will take longer to occur. How should we design data collection and impact measurement at the early stages? Do we need to wait to reach a particular sample size before carrying out impact evaluation?
Okay, thank you, Radhika, for the question. And this is a very interesting and important question. Like I mentioned, SBCC is evidence-based. So when you start out with an SBCC intervention, the first step is to design a baseline evaluation, and in that you will define your goal, outcome, output, your objectives. This is the time where you will do that. In order to understand the barrier, the next step, which can be inbuilt in the baseline evaluation, is a communication needs assessment. You need to understand what are the communication need of that particular population, because we just can't assume, sitting from our offices, that group will not be aware or will be aware. We cannot make any assumptions. SBCC is very evidence driven, very theory driven. So we need to make a communication need assessment. Based on that, the barriers that would come out, you will design your activities on that. You will design your M&E framework. Then it will be designed what should be your what could be the outcomes, what could be the objectives, and the impact evaluation, the sample size. Okay, that is the, like I showed it in my slide also on SBCC development process. When you do audience segmentation, you also kind of roughly see that what is the sample size that you would be covering. Like in a particular village, if there are around 900 adolescents, so that will be your target audience, that will be your sample size. So all that groundwork will have to be done at the beginning. Monitoring, that's why monitoring is required time and again, to see whether you're going in the right direction. Monitoring is also important to see that you're not conducting the activity with the same set of people, because you have to cover 900 adolescent girls. So for that, you have to, spread your activities accordingly. You have to cover all the mohallas, the tolas in the particular community. And the impact evaluation will be based on the baseline evaluation, the endline evaluation, as we call it. We will assess based on the baseline evaluation how far we have reached, what have been achievements, what have been the gaps. And that's how an impact evaluation leads to change in the design of the program or the policy in the future. Or if you will be conducting another intervention, then that findings would really help you. So this is the complete process. I hope I have answered your question. Thank you.
Well, I think we could also connect with them later, and if there are more queries, we would love to hear. I think this is actually bringing us right to the end of a fantastic workshop. But before we close, we have with us Mr. Abhishek Mali. He is from Glenmark Pharmaceuticals. He is the project executive for CSR. I would just like to invite him to just share some thoughts over the entire session and the work that has been going on. Please, Mr. Abhishek Mali, come online.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Abhishek, working with Glenmark from last 6-7 months, and I would like to thank Rise Infinity Foundation for arranging this workshop, and also World Food Program expert team, Dr. Khan, Dr. Wagulkar, Dr. Ghatak, and Ms. Kaushik for giving such a insightful information. And I would like to tell you about Glenmark work in addressing nutrition. So Glenmark is working at 9 locations and implementing Project Kavach, through which we are, also addressing the nutrition issues on ground through our child health project, Project Kavach, and we are monitoring. We are first identifying SAM and MAM children and monitoring their growth through our local NGOs. And so nutrition is one of the focal areas of the child health project. And apart from this, in last 1 year, during the COVID times, Glenmark had pledged 5 million meals, and it has been completed by distributing dry grain kits in 17 states. So this is our, this is the work which has been done by Glenmark, and it will be continuing the same. So thank you everyone. Over to Anjali.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. That was really good. Good to know there's so much happening. And I think we all are well aware. And I would just like to say, like, all good things do come to an end. And unfortunately, so even this fantastic workshop, I find it hard to believe that we spent almost the entire day, almost 4.5 hours, with the continuous, to and fro of information. And there are more questions and more suggestions coming in. I think that's something that we really look forward to, and I really appreciate this. So on behalf of IDOGRO Impact Solutions Rise Infinity, I would like to take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks to all those who've contributed for today's informative and interactive session on capacity building for nutrition-focused NGOs and CSOs. Today's workshop was presented by the Glenmark Foundation. It was conducted in collaboration with UN World Food Programme as knowledge partners and IDOGRO Impact Solutions as the process partners. At the outset, I would like to thank Ms. Tinsy George and Mr. Abhishek Mali from Glenmark. They've enabled this unique knowledge sharing platform. We started off with the Nutrition Awards of 2021, and today's session was actually a key part as a deliverable and to further the entire objective of knowledge sharing. Thank you so much, Glenmark, for your support and consistent support. I would also like to thank our experts from World Food Programme. We have Dr. Sharika, Dr. Siddharth, Manisha, Tanmoy. I think you all have together enlightened us with so much knowledge, and I think there's a lot to take away from. So if people have prepared notes, there is a lot that you have to actually sit back and review. I think it's this entire, treasure of information that will really have a great impact. I also would like to thank Jyotsna. She's not on the call today, but she's been with us in this journey from the very start. So thank you so much. And thank you to the entire WFP team for your commitment and presence. And also a short thank you to the IDOGRO team, Ms. Kiran Shaiva, Valerie and Deepak for their support and unflinching coordination to make this happen today. And finally, a heartfelt thanks to all the attendees for being active right from morning today, for your participation, your commitments, your thoughts and comments. And we really, together with WFP and Glenmark and IDOGRO, I really hope that you found great value in this information that was shared, the exercises that also were conducted that helps you to further your work and your impact. All right. I've shared a Facebook link where you can always go back to and see the entire recording and entire presentation. It would be great if you want to even connect. I think, Siddharth, if you want to share the presentation with them, or you can share where the presentation is going to be available, they can always go back to it and refer to it as a good resource. There will also be a feedback form, I believe Valerie has shared here. So it'll just take about 60 seconds of your time to just quickly let us know what you thought about today's session and what we can do to actually help you achieve your work objectives better. Thank you so much, Manish. Thank you, Kalpana. Thank you, Dr. Sangeeta Pawar. Really great to have you. I'm loving all the messages here. We'll also share it on the LinkedIn group. Absolutely, Kiran, we'll be doing that. So with that message, I think we move to the end of today's workshop. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.